On February 9th, 2004, a young nursing student named Maura Murray left her dormitory at the University of Massachusetts Amherst and drove north into the White Mountains of New Hampshire. By nightfall, her car would be found crashed and abandoned on a lonely stretch of Route 112. Maura herself would vanish without a trace, leaving behind one of America's most enduring missing person mysteries. What happened in those final hours? Was this a planned disappearance by a troubled young woman seeking escape? A tragic accident in the unforgiving New Hampshire wilderness? Or something far more sinister? For more than 20 years, investigators, amateur sleuths, and Maura's own family have searched for answers. Tonight, we examine the evidence, explore the theories, and ask the question that has haunted a generation. What happened to Maura Murray? Maura Murray was born on May 4, 1982, in Hanson, Massachusetts. By all accounts, she was a bright, ambitious young woman with her whole life ahead of her. At 21, she was in her junior year at UMass Amherst, studying nursing with hopes of eventually becoming a nurse practitioner. To her family and friends, Maura seemed to have it all together. She was an accomplished athlete who had competed on her high school track team, earning all-state honors. She was academically gifted, maintaining good grades while working part-time jobs to help pay for her education. But beneath this successful exterior, cracks were beginning to show. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, those closest to Maura would later recall troubling signs that something was amiss. The first red flag came in early February 2004. Maura had been working as a security guard at an art gallery to earn extra money. During one shift, she was reportedly found crying at her post. When her supervisor asked what was wrong, Maura couldn't or wouldn't explain. She left work early that night and never returned. On February 5th, just 4 days before her disappearance, Maura received a phone call that would deeply disturb her. She was at work at her campus job when the call came in. Witnesses reported that whatever she heard on that call left her so distraught that she had to be walked back to her dormitory by a supervisor. The identity of the caller and the content of that conversation remain unknown to this day. On Thursday, February 5th, Maura was at her boyfriend Billy Rausch's off-campus party. According to witnesses, she had been drinking when she decided to drive Billy's car to return some items she had borrowed. What happened next would add another layer of complexity to an already troubled week. Around 2:30 a.m. on February 6th, Maura crashed Billy's car into a guardrail. When police arrived, they found her in tears. She was charged with driving under the influence, though the charges would later be dismissed. For someone who prided herself on control and achievement, this incident was deeply humiliating. But there was something else troubling about that night. Billy Rausch was not at the party when Maura crashed his car. He was serving with the Army at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. This raised questions about their relationship and Maura's state of mind that weekend. The weekend of February 7th and 8th saw Maura exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior. She was in frequent contact with her boyfriend Billy through email and instant messaging. Their conversations, later reviewed by investigators, revealed a young woman under significant stress. Maura also called her father, Fred Murray, multiple times that weekend. Fred would later say that his daughter seemed upset about something, but he couldn't get her to tell him what was wrong. In one conversation, she asked him about getting a new car, saying she was having problems with her 1996 Saturn sedan. Meanwhile, Maura's academic performance was suffering. She had missed several nursing clinical rotations, which was uncharacteristic for someone who took her studies seriously. Her professors were concerned, but Maura offered no explanation for her absences. Monday, February 9th, 2004 began like any other day at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Students hurried across the snow-covered campus to their morning classes, bundled against the February cold. But for Maura Murray, this Monday would be anything but ordinary. At 3:15 p.m., security cameras captured Maura withdrawing $280 from an ATM near campus. This would be one of the last confirmed sightings of her in Massachusetts. The grainy footage shows a young woman in winter clothing, moving with apparent purpose, unaware that she had less than 4 hours left before vanishing forever. Shortly after her ATM withdrawal, Maura sent a series of emails that would provide the first clues about her intentions. She contacted her professors and work supervisors, citing a death in the family as the reason for her upcoming absence. She asked for a week off from her campus security job and permission to miss her upcoming clinical rotations. There was one problem with this explanation. There had been no death in Maura's family. Investigators would later confirm that all of her immediate and extended family members were alive and well. This fabricated family emergency raises the question, was Maura planning to leave? And if so, why did she feel the need to lie about her reasons? Maura's next stop was a local liquor store, where security footage shows her purchasing a significant amount of alcohol. Vodka, Kahlua, and Bailey's Irish Cream. The total came to about $40, a substantial purchase for a cash-strapped college student. This alcohol purchase would later fuel speculation about Maura's intentions. Was she planning a party? Was this for personal consumption during what might be a difficult time? Or was it meant for someone else entirely? Back at her dormitory, Maura packed quickly. She gathered some clothing, her laptop computer, textbooks, and other personal items. Notably, she also packed directions she had printed from the internet for destinations in Vermont and New Hampshire's White Mountains. At approximately 3:40 p.m., Maura Murray left the University of Massachusetts campus in her black 1996 Saturn sedan. Based on cell phone records and witness accounts, investigators have been able to reconstruct much of her journey north. She drove north on Route 91, then turned east on Route 112 into New Hampshire's White Mountains. This was familiar territory for Maura. Her family had vacationed in this area for years, staying at various hotels and resorts. But on this February afternoon, she was traveling alone, and her destination remains unknown. What was going through Maura's mind as she drove deeper into the mountains? Was this a spontaneous escape from the pressures of college life, or had she been planning this trip for some time? The truth died with whatever happened to her that night. At approximately 7:27 p.m., Maura Murray's car struck a snowbank and tree on Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, near a sharp curve known as the Weathered Barn Corner. The impact was significant enough to deploy the car's airbags and render the vehicle undrivable. The car came to rest partially in the road, blocking traffic. Damage was concentrated on the front end, with the windshield spiderwebbed from the airbag deployment. Inside the car, investigators would later find Maura's belongings scattered throughout the interior, along with the alcohol she had purchased hours earlier. But there was one crucial element missing from this crash scene: Maura herself. The first person to encounter the crash scene was Butch Atwood, a local school bus driver who lived nearby. As he returned home from his route around 7:30 p.m., he saw the damaged Saturn and a young woman standing beside it. According to Atwood's account, he stopped and offered to help the young woman, whom he would later identify as Maura Murray from photographs. She appeared to be uninjured, but was clearly shaken by the accident. When Atwood offered to call 911 or give her a ride, Maura politely declined, saying she had already called AAA. But investigators would later discover that Maura had not called AAA or anyone else for help. Her cell phone had no signal in this remote area, and there were no records of her making any calls after leaving Massachusetts. Despite declining Butch Atwood's offer for help, the bus driver decided to call 911 anyway. He was concerned about leaving a young woman stranded on a dangerous curve on a cold winter night. The call came in at 7:43 p.m., just minutes after his encounter with Maura. The first responder, Haverhill Police Officer Cecil Smith, arrived at the scene at 7:46 p.m. His response time was remarkably quick, just 13 minutes after Atwood had spoken with the young woman. But when Officer Smith pulled up to the Saturn, he found something that would launch one of New England's most baffling missing person cases. The car was there. Maura's belongings were inside. But Maura Murray herself had vanished. Officer Cecil Smith's initial assessment of the crash scene revealed several puzzling elements. The car had struck the tree with enough force to deploy the airbags and cause significant front-end damage, yet there was no blood inside the vehicle or any indication that Maura had been seriously injured. Inside the Saturn, investigators found Maura's backpack containing her textbooks, her makeup bag, and the alcohol she had purchased that afternoon. Some of the bottles had broken in the crash, filling the car with the strong scent of alcohol. This detail would later fuel speculation about Maura's condition at the time of the accident. Also found in the car was a printed email from Maura's boyfriend, Billy Rausch, discussing relationship problems, and the directions she had printed 2 locations in Vermont and New Hampshire. Notably absent were her cell phone, her credit cards, and any form of identification. Within hours of discovering the abandoned car, law enforcement launched a comprehensive search for Maura Murray. Search and rescue teams combed the surrounding forest, using tracking dogs, helicopters, and dozens of volunteers from the local community. The search area was vast and unforgiving. The White Mountain region of New Hampshire features dense forests, steep terrain, and numerous streams and ravines where someone could easily become lost or injured. February temperatures were well below freezing, making survival in the wilderness unlikely for someone without proper gear. Despite extensive efforts covering hundreds of square miles over several days, searchers found no trace of Maura Murray. No footprints leading away from the crash site, no pieces of clothing, no sign that she had ever entered the woods at all. The timeline of Maura's disappearance presented investigators with a crucial puzzle. Butch Atwood encountered Maura at approximately 7:30 p.m. He drove the short distance to his house and immediately called 911. Officer Smith arrived at 7:46 p.m., just 16 minutes later. In that brief window, Maura Murray would have had to travel on foot along a road with limited cover. The crash site was on a relatively straight stretch with good visibility in both directions. If she had walked along the road, she should have been visible to Officer Smith as he approached the scene. If she had fled into the woods, she would have left tracks in the snow, but the search teams found no evidence of her entry into the forest. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. In the days following Maura's disappearance, investigators interviewed neighbors and potential witnesses in the area. Their accounts would add both clarity and confusion to the case. A woman living nearby reported seeing a man smoking a cigarette outside the crashed Saturn around the time of the accident. This sighting was never confirmed by other witnesses, and the identity of this person, if he existed, remains unknown. Another witness reported seeing what appeared to be another car at the scene around the time of the crash, possibly a dark-colored sedan. Some investigators believe Maura may have accepted a ride from someone, either willingly or unwillingly. One of the first people investigators contacted was Maura's boyfriend, Billy Rausch. At the time of her disappearance, Billy was serving with the U.S. Army at Fort Sill in Oklahoma, over 1,200 miles away from the crash site. Billy's alibi was solid. He was confirmed to be on base at the time of Maura's disappearance. However, their relationship had been troubled in the weeks leading up to February 9th. Email exchanges between the couple, later reviewed by investigators, revealed arguments about fidelity and their future together. Billy would later describe receiving a call from Maura's father on February 10th, informing him that she was missing. He immediately requested emergency leave and drove to New Hampshire to join the search efforts. His emotional distress appeared genuine, and he became one of the most vocal advocates for finding Maura. The first theory investigators considered was that Maura had disappeared voluntarily. The evidence supporting this theory was compelling. She had emailed professors and employers with a fabricated family emergency, packed her belongings, withdrawn money, and purchased alcohol, all actions that suggested planning. Maura's financial situation was also precarious. She had maxed out her credit cards and was struggling to pay for college. Some theorists believe she may have decided to start over somewhere new, perhaps assuming a new identity to escape her financial and academic pressures. The White Mountain region, with its numerous small towns and seasonal communities, would provide plenty of places for someone to disappear if they chose to do so. But this theory has significant problems. Despite extensive investigation into her finances, there was no evidence that Maura had prepared for a long-term disappearance. She had no significant savings, no evidence of researching new identities or locations, and no history of planning or organization that would suggest she could successfully vanish and remain hidden for 20 years. The second major theory is that Maura, possibly disoriented from the crash or impaired by alcohol, fled into the New Hampshire wilderness and died of exposure. February temperatures in the White Mountains regularly drop well below freezing, and survival without proper clothing and equipment would be nearly impossible. This theory would explain why no trace of Maura has ever been found despite extensive searches. Bodies lost in the wilderness can remain hidden for years or decades, especially in terrain as challenging as the White Mountains. Weather records from February 9, 2004, show temperatures dropping to 15 degrees Fahrenheit that night. If Maura had fled into the woods wearing only the clothing she had on at the crash scene, hypothermia would have set in quickly. Additionally, the White Mountain region is home to black bears and other wildlife that could potentially scatter or destroy human remains, making recovery even more unlikely. The third major theory, and the one favored by Maura's family, is that she was the victim of foul play. This theory suggests that Maura either accepted a ride from someone who intended her harm or was abducted against her will. Investigators have identified several individuals with violent criminal histories who were in the area at the time of Maura's disappearance. While none have been definitively linked to the case, the possibility remains that a predator encountered a vulnerable young woman and took advantage of the situation. The witness who reported seeing another car at the crash scene adds credibility to this theory. If someone did stop to offer assistance, Maura may have felt she had no choice but to accept help. New Hampshire's White Mountain region, while generally safe, has seen its share of violent crimes over the years. The isolated nature of the area, with long stretches of road between communities, would provide ample opportunity for someone with malicious intent. One of the more complex theories involves the possibility that Maura was following or being followed by another vehicle. Some investigators believe the pattern of damage to her car is inconsistent with simply sliding off the road and hitting a tree. According to this theory, Maura may have been rear-ended or sideswiped by another vehicle before crashing into the tree. The other driver, possibly under the influence or lacking proper insurance, may have convinced Maura to leave the scene with them to avoid police involvement. While this theory could explain how Maura disappeared so quickly after the crash, there is no definitive physical evidence to support it. The damage to her car is consistent with hitting a tree, though some experts argue additional impact points could have been obscured by the primary damage. In the 21 years since Maura Murray disappeared, her family has never stopped searching for answers. Led by her father, Fred, and sister Julie, the Murray family has become expert investigators in their own right, pursuing leads, challenging official theories, and keeping Maura's case in the public eye. In February 2024, on the 20th anniversary of her disappearance, New Hampshire officials released an age progression photo of Murray, showing what she might look like today at 42 years old. The image represents both hope and heartbreak. Hope that someone might recognize her, and heartbreak that 2 decades have passed without resolution. In July 2022, law enforcement in New Hampshire initiated a search in the towns of Llandaff and Easton, following up on tips and potential new leads. These searches, like dozens before them, yielded no definitive evidence of what happened to Maura. In 2024, Julie Murray told WMUR a rusty knife found on a property a mile from the crash was given to her father, and cadaver dogs hit on that same property. It's the only tangible evidence the family has ever received. While this discovery represents the first potential physical evidence in the case, its connection to Maura's disappearance remains unproven. Maura Murray's case has become one of the internet age's first truly viral missing person mysteries. Online forums, podcasts, and social media groups dedicated to solving her disappearance have attracted thousands of amateur investigators from around the world. While this attention has helped keep the case active and generated numerous tips over the years, it has also created challenges. The proliferation of theories, some based on speculation rather than evidence, has occasionally hindered official investigation efforts and caused additional pain for Maura's family. Her case has been treated as a potential homicide by authorities, though no definitive evidence has been found to confirm this. The New Hampshire State Police and FBI continue to classify Maura Murray's disappearance as an active missing person case, following up on credible tips and evidence as they emerge. Due to the ongoing investigation, no additional information will be released at this time, authorities stated in their 2024 20th anniversary statement. This secrecy, while standard in active investigations, has frustrated those hoping for more transparency in the case. Today, Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, looks much as it did on February 9, 2004. The same curve where Maura Murray's car came to rest still challenges drivers navigating the winding mountain road. The trees have grown taller, but the mystery remains as deep as ever. Visitors still come to this spot, leaving flowers, notes, and mementos for a young woman they never knew, but whose story has touched their hearts. They come seeking answers to questions that may never be resolved. Was Maura Murray a troubled young woman who chose to disappear and start a new life? Did she die alone in the New Hampshire wilderness, a victim of the harsh mountain winter? Or was she taken by someone who intended her harm, her fate sealed by a chance encounter on a dark road? 21 years after she vanished, the question remains: what happened to Maura Murray? Her case stands as a reminder that some mysteries may never be solved, that some questions may never be answered, and that sometimes the truth remains forever hidden in the darkness.